Charlie Kirk?
Charlie and I were very, very close indeed.
Trump found out, didn't he? And there's pictures of you and him at Trump Towers.
Truth itself can go through 16-inch armour plate.
Who killed Charlie Kirk and why? Greetings, Bad Company podcasters. This is Yvonne Ridley. They say you can judge a person by the company he keeps. Well, my next guest is a friend of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and was also very close with Charlie Kirk as well. Plus, Donald Trump, the president, 47, certainly made John Mappin quite a few bucks. I don't know if you want to explain that, John.
Well, I suppose the press did pick up on it, really. I when he came down the escalator, I think it's one of those moments in life we can all remember where we were when Donald Trump came down the escalator at Trump Tower and announced he was going to become president. Well, I was upstairs at Camelot Castle, and my son had literally been born about 2 weeks before. I think it was June the 11th, 2015. And I, for many years, have used a philosophical algorithm to be able to predict outcome. And I applied this philosophical algorithm, or this method of evaluating information, to the probability of Trump winning the election, becoming the nominee initially and then winning. And I saw immediately that he would win, and I had complete certainty on it. So I took the entire book that night, or over the next couple of days really, at William Hill, which is a betting shop in the UK. And I think I placed about 36 bets on him at odds ranging from 33 to 1 to 20 to 1. And obviously, as I kept on putting on more bets, the odds were coming in. And eventually, of course, I had a call from a fellow called Graham Sharp, who was in charge of extreme betting at William Hill. He said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Well, I think you're about to lose a lot of money." He said, "Well, it's actually a great story." And so he leaked the story of this bet, which ended up being headlines all over the world. Of course, when he did win.
You had the last laugh.
Well, I did have the last laugh, really. And
a whole lot of cash.
Well, yes. I mean, not that I'm a betting man. I only really did it because you know what it's like. If somebody says, "Well, I know that Yvonne Ridley is going to be the next MP for Glasgow," then everyone said, "Well, you say that. You've got to have receipts to prove that." So really, I just put the bet on as a sort of a cheeky marker. As a way to sort of mark my card, as a proof of concept for this algorithm, really, which I had been working with for a number of years. And I wasn't intending to sort of clean out William Hill, but I don't think I quite cleaned them out. In fact, I think the publicity from the bet that they generated caused so much political betting to come in. And I think most of the money was put on Hillary. So I think actually they probably profited from me quite grandly.
But Trump found out, didn't he? And there's pictures of you and him together at Trump Towers.
Well, actually, it was Steve Wynn, who of Las Vegas fame, hosted a big fundraiser for him shortly after he was elected, and he had heard about what we had done because after obviously we placed the bet, I did a tremendous amount to champion the idea that he should be the correct person to vote for in 2016. And his son, Eric, called me shortly after the victory. And he said, "John, thank you. We saw everything that you did. As soon as you're in Washington, do please come and say hello." And so Steve Wynn was holding a fundraiser, and I happened to be in Florida. And I called up somebody who I knew the sort of central orbit. And I said, "Well, listen, Eric did mention to pass by, and I'm here in Florida." They said, "Well, come to this fundraiser." So, of course, I turn up and it's me and about sort of 150 other billionaires. So I was rather out of my depth. But he was there, and he had a copy of the Daily Express front page, which reported the bet. And I've actually got a picture of him holding up the Daily Express headline, about John Mappin winning a gargantuan sum. And when I met him, he said, "I know all about you." He said, you made rather a lot of money from me winning the election. I said, "Well, sir, when you back a winner, you win." Of course, he absolutely loved it. And Melania was absolutely joyful. Of course, she's got a new film coming out, so that'll be exciting.
Yes, I've heard quite a bit about it. Are you going to go to the opening, the premiere?
Well, I might go if there's one over here. I was supposed to be actually in Washington this week, but I've had to go somewhere else. But so I don't think I'll be going to the premiere there. But if there's one here, I'll most certainly go.
Now then, I mentioned some names earlier on.
Yeah.
Friends of yours, Candace Owens, the famous podcaster, and Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
The question I've got to ask you is, who killed Charlie Kirk and why?
That is quite a question.
Because you know his family, his wife, and
I do. It's a very to be honest with you, Charlie and I were very, very close indeed, and to witness his basically public execution has been the hardest thing in my life, really. It has been awful. And I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is I do hunt a lot. And I use, when one shoots, you live up in Scotland, there's a lot of red deer up there, and if you go stalking for red deer, you will use generally quite a high-powered rifle, and a 30-06 rifle is something that tends to be used for large game. Whenever I have shot a red deer, and I've shot a number of them, with a 30-06, I have always witnessed and seen an exit wound. In other words, you have the entrance wound where the bullet goes in, and then a 30-06 will actually punch a huge hole. The entrance room for the rifle bullet is very small, actually. And then when the bullet comes out the other side of the animal, it's a very large exit wound. And, of course, when the footage came out, it was very, very clear that there was no exit wound. And we're being told, obviously, that he was killed by this fellow. There's the official story, and there's what's been proposed. Of course, I haven't seen all of the evidence. But it is, what do they say? Something's wrong in the state of Denmark. It doesn't seem to me to be a story that holds together. And I don't know if you've been watching any of her podcasts, but Candace, who is a family friend, really, I happen to have introduced her to her husband. Oddly, I'll tell you that story later. But Candace has produced a series of investigation, which I would thoroughly recommend anybody to watch. Any free-thinking person should definitely be interested, because there are so many anomalies which point to certainly flaws in the official story that I think it behooves any right-thinking person to look into it, not least because the person who is currently in jail for allegedly shooting Charlie may well face the death penalty if convicted. And I've never particularly been a big fan of the death penalty anyway. Obviously, in America, that is the law. So you have to respect the laws of another country. But the idea of a Christian nation basically putting a person to death that may not be guilty of the crime which she's been accused, it would weigh very heavily on the soul of the nation. And we have to remember, this is not 1963. You know, in 1963, we were all told Lee Harvey Oswald had killed President Kennedy. For many years, the average Joe more or less accepted that. I don't think anybody believes that now. You know, Oliver Stone came forward, obviously, with his theories, and other people had come forward with their theories. But I think the if we were to do a poll, actually, you might poll your viewers. What percentage of your viewers believe that Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK? In those days, there was no internet at all, and you didn't have this free flow of communication. You didn't have X accounts and, you know, what do we call them? All these social media. There's Instagram, there's Reddit, there's all of these various different platforms, and people are very free to communicate. And what's happening with Candace is there's like a global, decentralized intelligence network that has sprung up around this very question: who killed Charlie Kirk? I'm of the belief that answer we have a right to know. And
who is she saying killed Charlie Kirk?
She's not, to my knowledge, she has not alleged that anybody has killed him, other than she's
pushing her podcasters into various directions, isn't she?
She's asking them to find information about various different, she has unanswered questions. So she'll say, I listened to one last night where she's asking for information about various different characters that she wants to gather up. She's still really in data gathering mode, as far as I can see. She's not laid out a specific accusation towards anybody.
I mean, some people have said that Charlie brought it on himself in a way because he was starting to cast huge question marks over another incident, October the 7th.
Right.
He
did certainly
He stirred the pot with October 7.
Yeah.
Saying, why did it take 6 hours for the Israeli military to respond to the Hamas attack, which is normally an area that somebody from the right in America wouldn't really go into. But he did. He started poking the bear, really.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to check the videos on that and exactly what he said. But Charlie was going through an evolution spiritually. And, you know, I met him in 2018. And he came here and we hosted an event for him. And, you know, actually arrived up at the RAC Club with Candace at what was supposed to be a dinner for 20. It ended up being a gathering of about 170 people. And he, at that time, was, I think it's probably not fair to say he was 100% supportive of everything that Israel did. But he was certainly, you know, let's say 99.9. He was wholly supportive of that. And what I observed and what I've seen through my friendship with him is he shifted. And
politically,
humanitarianly, he had become a father. And I think when you know, because you're a mum, he was politically, he had his position, but from a humanitarian point of view, when you become a parent and you start to see the sorts of ghastly devastation that had occurred in Gaza, or has occurred in Gaza. I think for most people, anybody can watch that footage who is a parent and not be affected by it. On both sides, I mean, listen, what occurred on October the 7th was absolutely unacceptable. And what has occurred subsequently has been, from a humanitarian point of view, absolutely unacceptable. And Charlie was deeply affected by that. And of course, I think it was in May of last year, he wrote a personal letter to Bibi Netanyahu. And he communicated that Israel was losing the PR war. And it's very interesting, actually, because I was out the other day in the countryside with a friend of mine who is a Jewish friend of mine. And he said to me, he's very well-to-do family, public school, not somebody who even, perhaps I would even have considered. It's not somebody who is like, you have people that are like obviously Christian or obviously Muslim, or in my case, obviously Scientologist. I mean, you have different types of people. Some people sort of wear it on their sleeves. Some people don't really wear their religion on their sleeve. I wouldn't have thought that, I never really, it's not something I would have necessarily have imagined. He said to me, due to the rise in anti-Semitism, I'm going to be needing to get myself a place in Israel so that if things get really bad here, I can leave. So it was shocking to me to hear this. At the same time, I've had people who, Muslim friends of mine, who don't feel comfortable with the level of the, increase in anti-Islamic communication.
Well, people are becoming very polarised.
They are. And I think Charlie could be faulted legitimately, and I don't think it's too early to talk about this, because he it's 3 months now, and he could be criticised for instance, I don't know if you recall, when he came here, he went on Breakfast TV or something. I think he was interviewed by GB News, and he said that Islam is incompatible with Western civilization. Well, I mean, I took him to task on that. I mean, that is a ridiculous statement to make, apart from anything else. If you understand your history, Islam has been part of Western civilization. Much of our mathematics, much of our architecture, a lot of the creative thought. Now it's one thing taking a view in relation to people breaking the law. It's a completely other thing to say that an entire religion is incompatible. And I think that, in that sense, he was stirring it up there. And I think that was wrong. But we had that type of a friendship. I could, say that sort of stuff to him. I mean, we stayed very, very closely in touch. And I did discuss that with him when, after he said it. I said, that's probably, I think that's regrettable. But on the other side, yes, he was asking questions. And this is why people did like him, is that he was a champion of free speech. And he spoke freely. He did speak very freely about his views. I don't think he reported anything at all that wasn't reported in the Israeli newspapers. He was always very careful to, communicate things that were verified by other press. But he was asking questions that were definitely uncomfortable. And so somebody looking at that would look at it, and if they would say, well, here you have a fellow who was probably one of Israel's greatest public relations assets over the last 10 years in America. Is he still an asset, or have we lost him? And I think anybody intelligent looking at the receipts and looking at his communication would say, well, if we haven't lost him, we're about to. And this is why he wrote to Bibi Netanyahu. And if one reads the letter, in fact, the letter was released, but it was presented that this was some sort of, an approval of what was going on. But if you actually read the letter, which of course most people don't read.
Well, it has fueled conspiracy theorists. And of course, Candace, who is not averse to stirring the pot as well.
Well, I don't think she tries to stir the pot. I think
she did say that France's First Lady was a man.
Have you seen her series?
I haven't, but somebody challenged me over that and said you have to see the evidence that she comes up with.
Yeah, I think if you watch the Becoming Brigitte series, which anybody can find on Candace's podcast, she's gone down a line of investigative journalism. I mean, listen, Yvonne, I'm speaking to Yvonne Ridley here. You are one of the finest investigative journalists this country has produced. So there used to be something in this country in the media called investigative journalism. It's very rare these days. And I think Candace is being an investigative journalist. Now, she may be right, she may be wrong, but I don't think she's doing it for the fun of it. I think she's doing it because if there are truths that have been hidden from society, she considers it's in the public interest for that information to be known.
Well, I don't want us to get sued by the Macron lawyers.
No.
We don't have a position on that.
No, nor do I.
So returning to Candace, she also has a reputation for being very thorough and fastidious in her investigations. And she has got to, well, I wouldn't say got to grips, but she certainly looked at the assassination of Charlie Kirk and decided to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's behaved in a way that he would have behaved if it was her that had been assassinated publicly in front of the entire world.
But now she's put herself in the crosshairs, hasn't she? She's certainly under threat.
Well, my view is the whole world is in the crosshairs. We are at a point in history where if the truth continues to be covered up in the way that it keeps occurring, that's a threat to everybody.
Why are people afraid of the truth?
Golly, you're asking me some serious questions today. I mean,
you cover it in your book, Sovereignty, the Restoration of Sanity. What really interests me about this is you put psychiatry under the microscope, and I noticed that you really got on your white charger and went after those who were trying to attack Candace Owens, saying, oh, she's barking mad, she's crazy, she's a nutcase, all the usual insults around mental fragility.
Yes.
And your defense of her was quite astonishing, so much so that she actually repeated it word for word on her last podcast.
Yeah, well, I could see that the same people that were attacking her were the same people that attacked Trump when he first tried to get elected. I could see that they're the same elements that have silenced other freedom fighters that I've studied and gotten to know. And there is a tiny, tiny hidden group of people who practice, it's really a philosophy of materialism. That's really the essence of it. It's the idea that man is an animal and is purely the sum of his chemical parts. Now, this is not actually a new idea, but it resurfaced in 1876 in Leipzig, Germany, when Wilhelm Wundt was commissioned by Bismarck to keep the Prussian army, which was a conscript army, fighting, and he needed a philosophy. And the idea that man is not an immortal spirit living through eternity, and that the current life is but one experience of man's journey, was anathema to this tiny group of what became the practice medically of psychiatry. And if you look at the history of psychiatry, if you look at the history of psychiatric philosophy, you learn very, very quickly that where there is evil in the world, you will find a psychiatrist. And hard at work, and you will find that these characters have embedded themselves. So where you see a Christian behaving in a psychotic way, you will find a psychiatrist who is somehow influencing that Christian. When you find a Muslim that is breaking the law or doing something that could be described as radical or extreme or certainly out of keeping with core Islamic tenet, there'll be a psychiatrist that is infiltrated. Some time ago we talked about Captagon, which is a drug that was created in order to get young people to take extremist actions in relation to the ISIS movement.
Well, it also made a lot of money for the Syrian regime under Assad.
Well, I don't know who profited out of it. What I do know is that Captagon will take a young man, and after a few months of being exposed to that drug, it's a mix of Ritalin and crystal meth. And it's not dissimilar to what Hitler fed to the Nazis. It's not dissimilar to what the Japanese fed to the kamikaze pilots. It creates a sort of a false bravery in battle. And the machinery of psychiatry is very, very misunderstood by the current culture. But it's something that I've researched deeply. It's something that I have a tremendous understanding of. And I saw that Candace was being... there was an attempt to suppress her communication by people who essentially were working for those elements. And I decided to call it out for what it was. And I think she was very, very appreciative, actually. In fact, when she first got the letter, she brought her to tears because there was so much truth in it. And I think that letter was read 40 million times on X. And certainly it was deeply appreciated. But, I mean, I as I say, Candace and George, her husband, are family friends. So, it was by complete fluke that I happened to introduce them. But, flukes do happen.
I mean, you mentioned before that you're a Scientologist, and we know that Scientology has gone to war with the big pharmaceutical companies. And, of course, a lot of the medication that people are taking now has to do with mental health and well-being. Is this not you?
Well,
just
I wouldn't say that Scientology has. I am a Scientologist. I've been a Scientologist for 35 years. I was in Los Angeles. I'd read the Daily Mail version, of course, which says that makes all sorts of claims, and I think most of us have read something about it. And I said to myself, I walked past a number of their buildings in Los Angeles. And when I walked past the buildings, the people walking in and out seemed perfectly normal to me. And the buildings all looked clean and tidy and very professional. And I sort of said to myself as a young man, I said, I just wonder if this is the one occasion where the Daily Mail hasn't quite got it right. And oddly, I know that Daily Mail is absolutely 100% correct on everything else, but when I walked into the Church of Scientology, I just said, here I am. I'd like to meet somebody here that knows about the subject, and I found it fascinating. I wouldn't say that the Church of Scientology went to war against the pharmaceutical corporations. I would say the other way round. L. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, he discovered a cure for depression, or a way to handle depression that doesn't use drugs. Of course, if you invent a better mousetrap, the people with the existing mousetrap get rather annoyed. And of course, if you can sell a book to somebody that costs all of sort of $5 or $10 or something like that, which it did in those days, and they can take that book home and they can help their friend resolve depression in a few hours, with a little bit of reading, I suppose, let's say 20, 30 hours, without using drugs, then that becomes an immediate threat to all of those profit models out there that rely on somebody turning up to a doctor saying, I'm depressed, and the doctor goes, oh, well, take this mother's little helper. And that game had been going on for a long time. So Hubbard, rather innocently, became interested in, how does the mind work? And he subsequently ran into this vested interest. And, when he wrote the first book on the subject in 1950, and it went to the top of the New York Times bestseller list for 36 weeks in a row. Well, this then became a threat to the actually psychiatric vested interests who thought that they had a monopoly on mental health. And so they started a disinformation campaign about the founder and about the Church of Scientology. So you're supposed to have heard all sorts of cuckoo things about it, and I won't repeat them here because you can read about them in the Daily Mail. But yes, there was a kickback, and I think when you do introduce truth, you asked me a very good question: why are people frightened of the truth? Well, I think it's a different answer for everybody, but if you are profiting from an activity over here, and somebody comes across with a benign activity over here that is going to cut across your ill-gotten gains over here, then you're not just frightened of the truth. You become incensed, and you think, well, I have to take this fellow down. So I think the truth tellers and the truth seekers, and Charlie, of course, was a great truth seeker. In fact, I have a text from him where he says, John, thank you so much for opening my eyes to the psychs. And he was he was zeroing in on who it is on this planet that is seriously causing the trouble. I mean, just take, what's been happening in this country for the last few years. I mean, we're looking at a population that has sort of allowed itself to be exposed to a military-grade psychiatric hypnosis program, and look at the craziness that has occurred over this period. Well, Charlie was onto all of that, and he was talking about it, and Candace too. And of course...
Well, that could also make them targets because, you're attacking a multi-billion-dollar industry.
I'd love to say it's multi-billion. It's actually multi-trillion.
Multi-trillion.
It's multi-trillion. It is a
lot
vast.
of cash.
It is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of cash,
Mm-hmm.
and there are some people that have integrity in this world, who wouldn't compromise their integrity for money. I know you to be one of them, and you've had the most extraordinary track record as a journalist. But there are others who are willing to sell out actually for very little money, and that's a shame. But that is the anatomy of life. And what is good, and the reason I think shows like this are so important, is that truth itself can go through 16-inch armor plate. And when people actually hear the truth and they start thinking for themselves, well, they can, anybody can look into the history of psychiatry. I mean, if somebody actually wants to look into the history of psychiatry, there's a organization called the Citizens Commission of Human Rights, CCHR.org is their website, and you can. What I'm saying here is not new information. This has been known since about 1966, so it's not a new analysis, but it's becoming much more relevant today. I think really because of the vast numbers of people that have been told there is no cure for depression here. You're just going to be hooked on these drugs for the rest of your life, and eventually these drugs destroy people. And of course, in the military sphere, they're used with a far more nefarious intention. So it's interesting.
Well, the Americans did a lot of experiments with their own military over psychiatric drugs.
They did.
Probably looking to get fearless soldiers, or what makes somebody feel invincible and not fearful in a combat situation.
Yeah, well, that was when in 1951, the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, was if not the first, I think he was the first person to document in writing. It's in his second book, it's Science of Survival. It was written in 1951. The precursor to the MK-Ultra program. And the MK-Ultra program, he called it pain drug hypnosis. They would drug somebody, they would expose them to pain, and they would hypnotize them at the same time. And the military was starting to experiment on their own citizens with these psychiatric techniques, because far from being any type of benign science, psychiatry is actually a political weapon, and it's been used as a political weapon. So they developed MK-Ultra, which began, I think, in 1953, and that's now very well documented. And this is what Candace has really been, that's the line she's been going down. She's been looking into what are the actual origins of MK-Ultra. And is the MK-Ultra program really effectively still in use? And what we find is, and what we saw during COVID, is that those psychiatric techniques were used on civilian populations in terms of how people were programmed to act, in terms of the fact that, millions of people lined up like lemmings to take an untested medical treatment that now has been proven to harm. I don't think there's anybody that has
been proven, though? I mean, I was one of those sheeple that that lined up, and
many did.
I was just terrified of the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, and many were. My mother did too. My mother was terrified, and there was a lot of fear creation in the media. That's something that in hindsight we can look back at and we can say, well, how good was the data that was being put out by the mainstream media? How reliable was it?
Well, if you stand up today and start putting a question mark over COVID medicine, people get shut down on websites, kicked off social media platforms. It's a very hot topic.
Well, my Twitter account was removed and my Facebook account was taken down, and I was censored when I presented a cure for for COVID, and of course, the cure now is acknowledged as working very, very well indeed. Thankfully, after Elon Musk bought Twitter back, I was given back my Twitter account. They'd skinned a few 100,000 followers from me, but no, it was. We've lived through some very, very dark times with regard to the media, and I think it's a subject that not everybody still is willing to communicate about. Other than, funnily enough, in the farming community, where I was very open because I spend a lot of time with farmers down in the West Country, and I've had about 5 to 10 farmers come up to me recently and say, you're so right. Friends of mine's daughters, they're miscarrying. We think it's something to do with the vaccine. Well, maybe they're right, maybe they're not right. But I would say the grassroots awareness that something negative occurred as a result of that is now on the increase.
But the whole point of a vaccine is to eradicate a disease, like smallpox.
Well, listen, it's a point of educating oneself. One vaccine that deals with smallpox is not the same as an mRNA vaccine that was developed in record time. It's two completely different technologies. And some would argue that the mRNA treatment is not technically a vaccination. But I became very close friends with the fellow who invented mRNA. He's a fellow called Dr. Malone. And he was part of the original pilot program. He told me, don't put it anywhere near your body, John, and don't let any of your family take it. And actually, I flew him into London at my own expense, and I put him up, actually, in a hotel in London, and he gave a big presentation to a lot of politicians at the Carlton Club. And he is somebody who most certainly understands the technology of mRNA.
So you're not saying all vaccines are bad, don't take any?
No, of course not, no. But I think that, sanity is the ability to differentiate. Coca-Cola is not the same as sparkling water. So, you don't have to say, well, all drinks are bad. Coca-Cola probably, yes, is rather good for cleaning the toilet, apparently. But, personally, I enjoy it, actually. But it's clearly sparkling water is healthier for you than it's the ability to differentiate.
Because that's in the title of your book, The Restoration of Sanity.
Yeah.
What's happening in the world today? Is it that politicians just feel that they can stand up and lie to us, which some inevitably do? And, we've seen things happening and unfolding in America, and you think, what the hell is going on there?
Well, and I think that's exciting because the world is actually at a very critical point.
Well, it all depends which end of an ice gun you happen to be on.
No, I agree. But I think the world is recognizing that there is something seriously wrong. Even people who normally wouldn't be paying attention are now starting to pay attention. And they're in a state of what could only be described as need of change. Well, you see, below that state, you have the state of apathy. And that's actually the hardest thing. You'll find this out as you campaign in Glasgow.
Well, that's where we are in Britain at the moment, isn't it? Apathy.
A lot of people are in apathy, but a lot of people are coming up into need of change.
Mm-hmm.
And need of change is something that goes, you know what? There is something seriously wrong in the world. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure as hell going to find out. Or I do know what it is, and actually I'm going to do something about it. And that can only be said to be an improvement. And one of the interesting things about Charlie Kirk's assassination is too many people witnessed there. A person who, listen, I, for one, did not agree with everything that Charlie said, as I've said. When he came over here and he communicated that Islam it's not compatible with Western civilization. I thought that was a very destructive comment. Unnecessary. But he was free to say it, and somebody else is free to counter it. The fact of the matter is, people like Charlie, not because necessarily what he said, but because he was all about pushing free speech. And this is what is, people are coming up to using their right to speak freely. They're coming up to, for instance, even this little conversation we've had now. Well, in the past, somebody might watch this and go, well, that's very interesting. Yvonne's got a very interesting podcast. I found it interesting, but I don't dare share it on Facebook. Well, now you might find somebody goes, well, actually, that's very interesting. I'm going to send it to 5 of my friends on Facebook. That's what I'm going to do. So they're coming up to wanting to participate in the sharing of truth. And the fact that anybody can look into the investigation. There's an amazing website that somebody contacted me, actually, and they created this website. It's called whokilledck.com. whokilledcharliekirk.com. So it's whokilledck.com. And that website lays out the official story and an alternative viewpoint of what others have observed. And to my mind, nobody can look through that website without drawing very, very different conclusions. So people now are waking up, and I do think that Charlie has become the turning point that he postulated in the world. It may not go the way that he thought it would go, because once people really start looking at the truth, they will arrive actually at the truth, because the truth is very interesting. It will appear to people that genuinely seek it.
Well, it's a bit like the idiom, isn't it, that you can fool some of the people some of the time, and all of the people...
Something like that.
Something like that, anyway.
Yes, exactly. No, I know exactly what you mean.
Now, we'll probably never agree on Donald Trump, but do you think that the reason why he became so popular is that he cuts through all the red tape and says, I will deliver this, I will do that, and of course these are things that politicians rarely say?
Well, I think both of us have been involved in the world of politics for sufficient time to realize that I don't think there's any political leader that one would completely agree with. Well,
getting a statement from Sir Keir Starmer is like trying to nail jelly to the wall.
No. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that we've run into in our respective careers in the political orbit, you could say. I personally decided to put our, if you like, family name and support behind President Trump when he came down the escalator, is because I saw that Hillary was already suggesting a no-fly zone over Syria, and I considered that stupidity would have resulted in a war with the Russian Federation. And I thought that she would take us towards a World War III scenario. I knew, or I had some prediction as to what was already been planned in relation to Ukraine, and I just realized that President Trump was somebody that wanted to be perceived of as a peacemaker. And I think on the whole, other than a few notable examples, he has tried to calm down conflicts geopolitically. That's what interested me particularly about him.
Well, not by kidnapping the president of Venezuela.
Well, I would have to agree with you on that. I found that to be a very surprising, and let's put it this way, it's not something I would have done, but he did it, and as I say, I don't think we would disagree on that. And I wouldn't attempt to justify it because it's under any concept of international law, if there is such a thing. I would agree with you on that.
I mean, he does say and do some unhinged things. His board of peace,
Right.
which doesn't contain a single Palestinian, even though it's been brought together to form a future for Gaza. And how can the people of Gaza feel as though they've got any future if they're not invited to the big table to sit and discuss their future?
Well, if that is in fact the case, I'm sure you have a point. I'm not completely familiar with that subject. It's not a subject that I have really spent a great deal of time on. I certainly found what's occurred in Gaza to be extremely distasteful. And my observation on it is I am very, very worried for many Jewish friends of mine who their lives here in England have been made almost impossible because the actions that Israel has taken in relation to Gaza, it's going to take a long time for a lot of people to forgive that, if indeed they ever will forgive it. And I think Candace made some very strong points on that. And the idea of creating some type of sort of a holiday resort there, I mean, I find that to be absolutely, utterly distasteful.
I just think that some of the things that he said and done have been positive. I will hand over the JFK who killed him files. I will hand over the Epstein files, except he hasn't. And people know that there's something rotten about these cases and they don't like being lied to.
No.
And so having somebody come in and promise to unveil this and expose that is like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it is. It's a breath of fresh air if indeed he follows through on it. But he hasn't yet followed through on Epstein. He hasn't yet followed through on
JFK.
I mean, last I heard, I spoke to somebody yesterday who knows Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who's quite an interesting young lady. Apparently, the files went to a judge. The JFK files went to a judge, and the point was we want these things unredacted, and he's making them go through 5 million documents before anything serious can happen with them. So, the amount of work that involves. So they are being slow walked through as to whether or not we get them before the end of Trump's term. I'd be surprised. You've got to ask, well, why is that? Who do those files incriminate? And that is essentially the big question that all these sort of exposés have. Which is why I think that the role of a truth seeker and the role of these small little independent pockets of truth that you find in various different places on the internet have so much value. Truth has a funny way of working its way through a society. And, word of mouth, of course, is a lot more powerful than people.
Now, before we let you go, there is a mystery that you would like solving. And you mentioned family name before.
Yes.
John Mappin. You're part of the Mappin and Webb jewelry dynasty. And In the 1950s, there was something, an exquisite piece of jewellery called...
Well, it's called the Mappin tiara, or more specifically, the Irene Mappin tiara.
Yes.
And I brought a picture of it for you, which perhaps you can put up on the screen. It was known to be one of the most beautiful tiaras ever made. It was made for my great-great-aunt, Irene Mappin, and it was a gift to my mother on her wedding day. What was amazing about it, it was at the crest of it, it had 3 lilies, which it was sort of diamonds set in platinum or silver or something of that nature. And it was sprung set, which meant that when the person walked with it, the petals on the lilies would shimmer, or they would, they were like on little springs. Mm-hmm. And so this tiara, when you walked in the room, it would literally just catch the eye because the light would be, fractured by it, or I don't know what you call that with light, whatever light does when it hits a diamond, refract.
Refracts.
It refract off it, that's the word. And so what happened is after my mother's wedding, she took the tiara into a jeweller in Hatton Garden. And oddly, that very night, the Hatton Garden jeweller was raided. Now, I'm afraid I don't have the name of the Hatton Garden jeweller, but this family, if you like, heirloom was lost. And the other day, I did just put out a post because I just thought, well, maybe out there somewhere in the world, there is somebody who was sold this tiara, because something tells me it wouldn't have been broken up, because to break it up would have reduced its value tremendously. And I just thought out there might be somebody out there. So I thought, well, I'll post this up and I'll let everybody know that, if somebody does come across it, there'll be a reward. And,
well, let's see if some of the Bad Company podcasters can turn
see if you've got any of your, all the sleuths out there can have a go and see if they can. But if they could sort of share it about a bit, then you never know. Somebody out there might go, well, probably, oh, well, this is my granny's now. They probably won't want to let it up. They're rather beautiful things, though, tiaras. And, of course, what a nice thing for you to raise her. Thank you so much. Yeah, and it would give my mother great pleasure.
Yeah.
She's 88 now, my mother. So it would give her immense pleasure to find it.
Well, let's hope we can solve the mystery. John, thank you so much for coming in. As usual, a mine of information and for throwing light on the murder mystery of Charlie Kirk.
Well, all I would suggest is if people actually want to look into it, go to whokilledck.com, take a look at that website, watch Candace's show. She does a very nice tribute to him at the beginning, and then there's a series. I think there's about 20 episodes now, so it's a good old watch. However, it's extremely revealing. And when I watched it, I learned things about the world that I just did not know. And I think that's the purpose of what people like you and Candace are trying to do. And hopefully when she comes to London, I'll have the chance to introduce you.
Yeah, we'd love to bring her in on Bad Company. Thank you so much, John. Well, that's all we've got for today. I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I have. And do subscribe, stay tuned, and see who will be sitting in the hot seat next. Thank you.